On behalf of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, welcome everyone to this great Ask the City Manager Roundtable. This is meant to be an opportunity for you to interact, and we have a great panel today, and I'll ask Erin Wells. Erin Wells is our host. She's the Assistant City Administrator in Highland, Utah, and a great friend of mine. So I'd just like to turn the time over to Erin, and she can just take it away. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you, John. Yeah, John and I go way back. Actually, our families even go way back. Apparently, once upon a time, my grandpa coached John in Little League Baseball. So good old Tooele, Utah. If you've been there, it's a great place. So thank you. Yes. So today I also serve on the board of the Utah City County Management Association, and was asked to join with the league in this, and I'm really excited for this and hope that it proves beneficial for everyone who's here. So I'm just gonna start out and introduce our panelists, and I wanna thank them for taking some time to share their expertise with us. So with our panelists today, are Wayne Pyle, who's the city manager in West Valley. Do you wanna give a little wave, Wayne? Jason Walker, city administrator in Lehi, and I've got to work with Jason for a few years there in Lehi and enjoyed my time with him there. Matt Dixon, who is the city manager in South Ogden, and Brett Hauser, town manager of Bryan Head, and Ty Bailey, who's the city manager of Morgan and who is the first city manager of the city of Morgan too. So I think he'll also bring a good, unique perspective to us. So we had two goals with this panel. First would be to kind of help elected officials more understand the profession, understand what we do for maybe some electeds who do not have city managers. But then for elected officials who do have city managers, get some tips and tricks, best tactics for building a good relationship and working well with your management team, department heads, staff members, and others. And we feel like these managers, I am going to, just as an FYI, I'm going to use the term managers kind of generally. Some on our panel have the title of administrator, but they are the CAO of their organization. So they bring a lot of great experience in the municipal world, and we're happy to have them share that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, and so I've got a few questions prepared, but I would love to hear if there are any questions from the audience as well. So you should be able to unmute yourself if you do have a question, or I think there's a chat box that John will be monitoring as well for us and chime in as we need. But so I'll kick it off and then hopefully give some time to the rest of you. So panelists, can you each take a couple of minutes and tell us about your background and what led you to your current position? I guess I should say who should start. Let's see, Jason, you're on my left, so let's go with you.
Sure, thank you. So I've been in my current position. I've been with Lehi for 6 years now. Prior to that, I was in Eagle Mountain as an assistant administrator. My first career out of college, I was a high school teacher and a football coach. I taught history and government and coached football. Anyway, I went back to school and found this profession, and in many ways it's similar to being a teacher and a coach. You're constantly talking to people, communicating ideas, helping people or helping get the most out of your people. So really that's kind of my story. I'm in my second career, but it's been a lot of fun. It's great to see all the different workings of a city. So it's a little bit about me.
All right, Wayne.
Okay, I show unmuted, so I'm going to assume everybody can hear me. So it's an interesting question background wise. I think there are some people that sort of fall into this profession almost by circumstance, and others that choose it. I'm one of those ones that chose it back in school. I went to BYU's MPA program and wanted to be a city manager from the beginning of that. So I've been in the career field for about 28 years now, and been with West Valley City amazingly for 23, and almost 18 of that as the city manager, which here in Utah seems to be a lot more the norm than most of the country. We seem to have a lot more longer tenured managers here than a lot of the country. A lot of the country, they tend to be more temporary. What led me to my current position, or at least city management field overall, is I've always had an interest in government service or public service. And so this has always been an interesting sector for me.
Thank you. All right, Matt, you're up.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. As Aaron mentioned, I'm in South Ogden currently. I've been here going on 10.5 years. Prior to that, I was in neighboring cities, South Weber, 5 years as a city manager there. I've also spent some time, not as a city manager, but working for other municipalities, South Salt Lake City, Centerville City. Started out years ago part-time in Weber County. So I've actually been working for local government for 24 years at some capacity. And this was not my initial career path. I went to school. My undergraduate is psychology, thought I wanted to be a marriage and family therapist. And ended up between my bachelor's degree and grad school working in Centerville City for a now retired incredible professional manager, Steve Thacker, who, I had just landed the job there to get me through my next level of schooling and kind of ready for life. And just started to observe Steve and watched him run the city, work with the elected officials and department heads, and quickly became very intrigued with the profession. I didn't know what a city manager even was when I started in Centerville, and he became a great friend and mentor, and changed my master's, went and got my MPA, and have really enjoyed it. What attracted me to this profession is the diversity, the challenges. There's always something to get me out of bed and get me to work, because there's always something going on in the city. Lots of challenges, lots of fun problems to try to solve, lots of relationships to try to work through. And I always say the good days are really good and the bad days can be really bad. But that's kind of why I enjoy working in local government.
Thanks, Matt. Brett, how about you?
I came out from California. I grew up in California, came to Utah to go to school, and got married. My wife's a little younger than I am, and so she was still in school, and I had to get a job. And somewhere in there while I was going to school, I kind of thought, maybe I should go into government, because I don't know, maybe it seemed more meaningful or something to me, or more purpose driven than your typical private sector employment. And so I did an internship for a congressman back in California, and quickly ruled out federal government as a potential future career. And everybody would always, I was studying public administration as an undergrad when that was an undergrad at BYU. And everybody kept saying, "Oh, you're going to be a city manager?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know what that is." And so one day I guess I decided to look into it, and I ended up doing an internship with Conrad Hildebrandt at Cedar Hills, and kind of got into government finance was sort of my groove there, and worked for several years with Park City in their budget department. Mountain towns kind of became my thing. Mountain towns were my thing, but like not Park City, not that particular mountain town. And so my wife, having come from a rural area, we wanted to live rural. And so we came down to Southern Utah, and I work in a mountain town in Bryan Head, and we live in a rural Southern Utah town down in Parowan, and that works out pretty well for us. I guess that's kind of my story of how I got where I'm at.
Thank you, Brett. All right, Ty, you're up.
Okay, so I'm Ty Bailey. I work for Morgan City. Like Aaron said, I'm Morgan City's first city manager. I also kind of stumbled on the profession. I was studying sociology and community and economic development, specifically how cities are built and put together. And I really just enjoy the people aspect of that. So I transitioned, got my undergrad in sociology and then did an MPA. I started in the government, or my first career was in emergency management. So right out of school, I went to work for the Utah Division of Emergency Management, and I got to be a liaison and over the community support component of that, just in support of local government. So I just help them prepare and respond to disasters, and I really enjoyed it. So I did that for 11 years, and it's actually my wife that said, "Hey, I thought you were going to be a city manager." And I was like, "Yeah, we're probably going to have to move if we go that direction," because I lived out in Tooele County and there are no administrators at the county or city level in either Tooele or Grantsville. So she was willing to move. So we moved to Monticello, about 5.5 hours from everything, in every direction. So she was willing to do that. So we did it, and really enjoyed my time there. I was there for 2.5 years, and I've been in Morgan ever since. I couldn't really think of a better place to end up. And at the time, Morgan didn't have a city manager. So of course it was never on my radar. And I think a manager sometimes look around and say, "Hey, if I had the ideal situation or an opportunity to live here or work there," we kind of aim for that. And it just kind of worked out. So that's how I ended up here. And I'm originally from a small town in Idaho. So now I'm about 2 hours from my parents' farm. And so it's really convenient to be back in northern Utah and in a beautiful small town. We're probably, well, like for West Valley would be like one neighborhood maybe of West Valley, but it would be the best neighborhood in West Valley. So
Morgan is a beautiful place for sure. So wonderful. So looking at who's on the call with us, I see some managers or department head types, and then a few names I don't recognize, who I'm guessing are elected officials. So panelists, what advice do you have? I'm thinking from both an elected official and a manager perspective of what are some of the best, thinking about the best relationships you've had with mayors or council members. What made those good relationships? What things did you as a manager do, and what things did that elected official do so that you could have a good relationship? And I'm going to let whoever would like to chime in, just because if all of you don't have something to say, that's okay, but I'll let whoever would like to go first.
I'll jump in. I think for me, the best relationships I've fostered with my elected officials has been when we saw each other as real people. We developed true friendships and relationships outside of the formal work setting. We got to know each other's families. And I think that helps tear down some of those walls and barriers that sometimes we may inadvertently put up. But again, just seeing each other as real human beings and understanding that both sides are going to make mistakes. Both sides may have preconceived notions or biases, but at the end of the day, we're good people and we have good intentions, and we're acting in good faith, and that's served me well dealing with elected officials.
Aaron, I'll jump in there too. I've had a long and great experience with elected officials, many different iterations of that over time, a couple of different cities. And what comes to mind as I've thought about working with my elected officials over time, what's worked best is probably summed up for me in two things. One, and this really just kind of builds on what Jason was saying. One is we view each other as being on the same team and moving towards the same purpose, which is the betterment of the community and the city that you work for, as opposed to, city manager is the representative of the employee group or, some other side or whatever. And then the other aspect that I thought and have felt most effective over the years is when I and the elected officials play off of each other's strengths. We see, okay, this elected official is going to have a natural connection with the neighborhood. The city manager can play sort of the more objective, got to look out for the whole city's interest side. And there are many situations like that where there are differing strengths that each party can bring to the team, so to speak, and help the city out.
Aaron, could I add my 2 cents as well? I just piggybacking off of Jason and Wayne, and couldn't agree more. I think one of the keys in creating an environment where there's that trust and that that working relationship to be working together for the common good of the community. I think a key part of all of that is understanding absolutely clearly what role everyone plays in the organization. It seems to me like where those relationships start to get strained, where those things can start to break down, a lot of times is an issue around a lack of role understanding or a lack of willingness to just stay in my lane, whatever my role is, whether that's the manager not staying in his or her lane, or whether that's a council member who wants to be mayor or wants to be a manager or a department head, right? And so I think one of the keys in having those relationships starts with a very clear understanding of, well, what is my role and what role do I play, and am I willing to play that role? And I just would add that to me that's what helps enable those relationships to grow, and trust can grow. You can start to understand everyone's strengths and abilities within their role. And I know there's a lot of managers probably shaking their heads that's typically where things can really start to break down in our local governments is that confusion or unwillingness to just do my role, just play my part.
So can I throw in a word that we probably haven't used in this city manager forum, and that is the word of love. I will say that throughout my career, there's been council members and elected officials that I love them. They're great, and I mean that. Recently had Bud Podeska on the council here in Saratoga. He passed away a couple of years ago. I was asked to be one of his pallbearers, and it was a hard emotional thing because we love those people that we serve, and we develop relationships as we go through these hard situations. And sometimes it's like a family kind of hard relationship, and you can still love and appreciate who they are and be completely dysfunctional for all the dysfunction that comes with those relationships. I see Kane Loader on here. Kane could probably attest to a heartbreak when Mayor Seguini passed away. I think we all have these connections if we love our communities and if we are pouring our hearts and souls into our profession. I think that love is a part of us. And I think that's why, I'm an emotional person. You all know that. I can get really hot, but I also love what we do. And there's a big part of my heart that is in the service that we're giving to our communities. And oftentimes that conflict that we have between us and our councils is when those friendships or those opinions may be different or something like that, but it's because we're pouring so much of ourselves into it. And so I know we don't use that word because we're professionals, but the reality is I think that there's people that we just learn to love through the years and decades of service that we provide with them. And that's, I think, the good part of this. That's the part that is the rewarding part, I think, because we love our communities, but that comes with the conflict. That comes with us working through the conflict. It comes with us having to figure out when a new person comes along, how they fit into the family and how they fit into that relationship. So I'm gonna throw that out there as kind of the emotional side of what we're trying to deal with, and that comes with a lot of baggage as well when things don't go right. And then how do you amend or how do you refresh the relationship, or how do you how do you salvage a relationship that's going bad because of the conflict? But you have to understand they love their community just as much as you do, and it's how do you build the common bonds that will help you have that strong relationship.
One thing I love about Mark, carrying on, is that he's always willing to chime in and share his thoughts. So thanks, Mark. Do you want to introduce yourself for those the electeds who may not know you, Mark?
Mark Christensen. I'm a psychotic city manager. I've been a city manager for about 17 years in 2 different communities. I love this both academically and professionally, and you got to love the hate sometimes.
Currently in Saratoga, yes? All right. I want to narrow in on something that Wayne said and a lot of you mentioned about getting on the same team, being on the same page, that kind of thing. Can you give us some ideas of some concrete things that you've done to build that with your elected officials? How have you what have you actually done to get on the same team with them?
So if I could mention, since my mayor didn't have a city manager before, and now he did, we went through this transition period where we got to set rules. And it's interesting because we're just jokingly, when we go into a meeting together, sometimes we say it's good cop, bad cop. And then we'll walk out and I'll be like, hey, I was supposed to be bad cop today. What happened? And he'll just say, they lied to me. I can't handle that. So our roles aren't just set in stone, but we do play off of each other. But we were able to set the terms on when it's okay to disagree. And one of the things I had to let him know is that my identity is not wrapped up in city manager. So an elected official runs on the fact that they are this person, right? Their whole identity is people like me, I have these connections. And I had to let him know I'm just Ty Bailey, right? What I do is I'm a city manager and I do that the best that I can, but you're not going to offend me by saying, hey, why are you doing this? Or why are you making that decision? And there was even a point when he just won. I had to tell him, Mayor, I'm not asking, right? Like, he's like, what are we doing? What are you doing here? And I had to remind him, this is an administrative decision. It's the best decision I can make with the information I have at this point, and we'll let this play out. But before, we couldn't make a decision because it would reflect either back on him or that sort of thing. And so, once we define those roles and just how the playing rules or whatever it is, we've been through a lot of transitional conversations that have just been really healthy and help our relationship. And now he's to the point where, he doesn't ask why or what it is that you're doing. And on the converse, I help him understand where people are coming from or why the administrative perspective is maybe as important as the political ramifications. And so we just set the ground rules.
Aaron, I don't want to take too much time on this one, but I am passionate about, some things that I feel like get us all on the same page with elected officials and staff. To me, one of the best things is spending the time and effort annually or more frequently if possible, but getting everybody together and having a clearly defined strategic plan on what are our objectives as a community and what are our obstacles and what are we going to focus on. I mean, every community has way more wants than any of us have budget for. And I found it very beneficial, both for elected officials as well as staff, to put those things on paper and be very specific about, okay, for the next 1 or 2 budget cycles, these are the big rocks, right? These are the big items that we're going to focus on to try to move the organization forward. then as little things come along, you can always compare those against the strategic plan, things that we all have agreed on. Ultimately, the council, right? They ultimately make the call to say, yes, these are our strategic directives and our goals and objectives. But when you have some kind of that guiding document that there's buy-in and support for, to me, it really helps when tough issues come up. You have that plan to lean on and to look back to and say, guys, let's not lose track. Remember, these are the things that we really committed to focus on. Now we can change this if that's what we want to do, but right now here's kind of our marching orders as an organization. I found that really helps keep the organization focused and keeps little pet projects or tough issues derail us in our effectiveness in moving the organization forward. So I'm a big fan and believer in some form of, strategic planning, goal setting, performance measurement that we can track and show the community, even politically, right? Elected officials can show the community, here are our objectives. This is what we are doing for the community. So thanks, Aaron.
I'd like to add a hearty amen to Matt's statement there. I think having a good strategic plan, a clear one, really does most of the work for getting everybody on the same page, making sure that you're acting as a team, pushing in the same direction. And then I would append to that if you can have that strategic plan clearly tied into your financial plan, into your budget, and to your personnel development plans, that goes a long ways too, because I think in a lot of cases, you just develop some kind of strategic plan, and if it's not clear that what we're doing administratively from day to day ties in clearly with that strategic plan, that you can still have a gap, a trust in the gap, or a gap in the trust, I mean to say. And so that's helped us to here anyway to all get on the same page.
If I could jump in, I think the biggest conflicts don't come from the big strategic plan stuff. I think Matt and Brett are spot on. That's where you get the easy consensus and you've got a clear marching order. I think it's the day-to-day when someone calls their friend on the council because they're upset about an administrative smaller decision. I mean, that's what we spend probably way too much of our time putting out the little fires on. It's the little political, I didn't get what I wanted kind of answers that typically cause the bigger issues. And then it's dealing with policies and process.
All right. Let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talking kind of theoretically about city management, maybe for anybody who might not have a city manager in their organization. What kind of value do you feel like a city manager, a strong, good leader at the top brings to an organization?
Aaron will start and just kind of throw out one quality. There's a few that I'm thinking of, but I'll just take one and let some of the other guys chime in here. So flexibility in my mind is one of the qualities that a city manager that's either experienced, sorry, pardon for a sec. There we go. Flexibility is one of those qualities that a good city manager can both bring personally and imbue in the others that are in your organization. And that can be the employees, it can be the elected officials themselves. A lot of that is based on credibility that you've built over time, experience that you've had, also other formal instruments and tools that you have used that might actually sound, for example, a little bit contrary to some of the earlier commentary that was made about strategic plan, but strategic plan and formal goals actually allow flexibility. I think it was Matt that kind of illustrated that and saying, hey, this is where we are, this is the policy that we've set. How do you compare that against whatever today's crisis or desire or need for flexibility is? So that's one.
One time I helped a small rural town in Utah come up with recruit a city manager, and as they had a history in that town of, they'd had a good city manager, but prior to that, they'd kind of had a history of just kind of grabbing anybody from in town. You know, it was they almost kind of treated it like some rural towns treat elected official positions, where it's like, all right, whose turn is it now? You know, just go grab. All right, it's your turn. You're going to be the city manager until we get mad at you and throw you out. That's kind of how they approach it. And but they'd had a good experience, but there were still some people in the town who felt like, no, we don't need like a good professional city manager that we're going to pay anything resembling real money to. And so I sat down and helped them in their recruitment process. And one of the things that I was telling them was, you know, that city manager, I feel like we're kind of repeating ourselves, but I had actually thought this question out, so I'm going to answer it anyway, even if it's a little bit of repetition. But you know, if you have a city manager who can think strategically, then they can help establish that vision and help gain buy-in to that vision, and get everybody to share that vision. And then if you have a city manager who's got some talent with financial planning, then they can tie those two things together. And if they have any talent with personnel management, then they can make sure that everybody on the staff is rowing in the same direction. And once you have all those things together, then what you have is you have very little waste in effort and energy. And a lot of these towns that don't have that kind of leadership, they waste a lot of effort and energy and money and taxpayer money. You know, it's like the idea of a city is we all get together and say, what is it that we want? You know, we want streets. Okay, fine. We want streets. Well, what does that cost? Why would we pay any more collectively? Why would we pay any more than it actually costs to get streets, right? And why would we charge ourselves more? But a lot of times I think we end up charging ourselves more for the things that we want, because we can't all get on the same page as to what it is we want and, you know, what we're willing to pay for that, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of wasted effort and energy, and having good leadership, even though it might cost you a little bit of money up front, will save you a ton. I mean, I hate to put it all in dollars and cents, but it'll save you a ton on the back end. Yeah, that's the end of that thought.
Well, kind of along those lines, what I was thinking of, and maybe you guys can help me with the word, but it's somewhere between confidence and courage. And I don't mean that in a arrogant way, but I think a good manager needs to have the confidence or the courage to make tough decisions and stick by them. Because if we're not willing to make tough decisions, then what are they paying us for, right? I mean, we have to, and I'm not saying being careless and throwing caution to the wind, exactly the opposite. Our responsibility is to research things and gather all available information. But once the time comes to make the decision, we have to make tough calls, and we have to have the courage to stand by those decisions and accept the criticism that inevitably is going to come our way. And we have to have thick skin. And I think for the elected officials on the call, one way to help that is to assure your manager that you're behind them when they make tough calls, and that let them take those arrows for you. I always tell my council, I'm happy to be the bad guy. I'm happy to be the person that has to say no. Just have my back behind closed doors, right? But anyway, I can't think of a better way to term it other than courage or confidence. But I think that's an important trait of a manager.
So I'll just add, I think it's also, I mean, it goes without saying, but the separation from legislative and administrative authorities, we kind of talked earlier about roles and responsibilities, but that clarity and that separation in processes is what allows those difficult decisions to be made. So every conversation or every decision doesn't have to be a political discussion. And without an administrator or city manager, you don't have a lot of opportunities as a council to have administrative discussions. They're always dealt with in council in an open forum. So then I just, one thing I value from all all our city managers is we all abide by a code of ethics. And that doesn't come with other job descriptions. Even when you swear an oath, it doesn't tell you how to conduct your business. It doesn't say you've got to declare your conflicts of interest. It says you don't have conflicts of interest. And that's, so, it's the education and the professionalism that you can bring to a city. And then just knowing that city managers take that code of ethics very seriously. It just increases accountability and performance. So.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I want to remind everybody on the call, if you have questions, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself and ask those questions. Or if you're not in a position to do that, you're welcome to type them in the chat box and we'll get to them as well. So we're happy to answer any questions that you guys actually have rather than just the ones I came up with. So in the interim, thinking again a little bit about elected officials and thinking about more with staff. John mentioned earlier that in one of the previous roundtables they were doing, the topic came up about staff members can get really nervous when elected officials ask them things or talk to them and that kind of a thing. And of course it depends on your form of government and things like that. There's some differences there, but what tips do you have for elected officials working with staff so that staff feels comfortable and and it can be a productive relationship?
Aaron, I would say I got a quick answer for that, and then would welcome anybody else tagging on. There's a lot of different ways to approach those relationships. I would say the thing that's most important though is just establish whatever that process is, so everybody's clear and understands how that's supposed to roll. And again, from that, once you have an established process, if you need flexibility, you can take or build flexibility into it. But you'll avoid a lot of grief and heartache, but just knowing what the process is in the first place.
I would just recommend not taking the approach that you're coming in to fix everything and everyone. A manager tries to develop people, develop staff, and sometimes the elected official can conflict with that approach. And if they're just there to help, it doesn't really matter, if they do it perfect or, things will get resolved. But just sometimes, because elected officials have a shorter window, a shorter perspective, because it's an election cycle, they get really in a hurry to problem solve or fix things in a city, and the staff really respond to that. That is intimidating. If you feel like even one council member has it out for a certain department or whatever it is. So those interactions, if you really want to have some influence, support your manager and approach things in a helpful way versus a fix it mode. So
in a similar vein there, I suggest to my council members that when they do approach one of my staff or department heads or whatever, that they don't walk in with the assumption that whatever they're concerned about is being done wrong. Recognize that the person you're talking to is an expert in this field. They've got education, they've got experience in this field, and don't just walk in saying, no, you're doing it wrong, let me tell you how to do it right. That's how you kind of end that conversation real quick. And I also tell my staff in reverse, don't assume ill intent on the part of the elected official who's making a suggestion. They're a lot of times the staff will jump to, well, they just want this for blah 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 nefarious or personal reasons, and it's like, well, no, typically elected officials they want to see their town get better. They want to see good things for their town, and that's where they're coming from. So go ahead and assume that positive intent, and then that helps with those conversations.
Aaron, I'm sure this is especially prevalent maybe as communities transition from not having a manager to having a manager. I think it goes back to spending some time understanding roles, because in communities, smaller communities particularly, that don't have managers, those elected officials take on roles, different roles, right? They can absolutely have administrative responsibilities over certain departments. They probably have a history of being much more hands-on on the day-to-day operations of the city. And so I think especially in those communities, as they grow and get to the point where they feel like they need a manager, I think it's very important to help through education understand, I mean, a two-headed organization or two-headed dragon is completely, dysfunctional. And the organization needs to understand that, as a single council member, if you have a city manager, it wouldn't be appropriate to go in and start directing staff. And but along with that, any manager would agree that, hey, those relationships are important. Yeah, I don't discourage my elected officials from having conversations with departments or staff, but it's a matter of them understanding you're there to build a relationship and just be there to show your support. But when if we have hard questions or need more detailed information on operations of a department because you may have concerns, well, then do me the respect of working through me as the city manager and allow me administratively to go ask those questions and find out. And so anyway, it's an important thing because you want those relationships and it's important to the organization, but you also don't want there to be confusion amongst staff on, well, who do I listen to when someone comes in and gives me direction, because they all want to please elected officials. And so we're constantly having those discussions between staff and elected officials to just remind us, like, hey, let's make sure we're just all working through the right channels so that we avoid the potential for misunderstandings and confusion.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. A couple of you have talked about making sure roles and responsibilities, proper roles and responsibilities, staying in your lane, I think is the phrase you used, Matt. And I'm curious, is your recommendation, is that something that should be codified? Is it something that should be in a policy? Is it something you do training on? How do you ensure that proper roles are maintained so that the organization is moving together where it needs to go?
So several years ago, learning from many of the colleagues on this call and others, we started from the moment elected officials file for candidacy for an elected office, we have an orientation. And right from that moment, we start training on, this is your role. This is what you are running for. This is the authority that you have. And we talk about that even before an election, they've just filed to run. This is how staff will communicate with you as you run for office, right? Because once elected, this is the same way they will communicate with you as an elected official. And so those are some best practices I've picked up from the association here across the state with other managers who have learned. And I found that to be very productive. It helps those just seeking office. Sometimes they file to run and they truly don't fully understand what that even means, other than some friends of theirs said, hey, you really should go run. And so I think starting early and reinforcing that through not only the election, but then through a good orientation for newly elected officials can go a long ways.
Go ahead, Brett.
I might be the dissenting vote on taking a really hard line of, you got legislative over here, you got administrative over here, and there's a hard dark line in between and we never cross it, I don't know if I'd be the only dissenting vote on that. Everybody knows when it comes down to it, there's always a little bit of a gray area there, and you're always playing in that sandbox, at least, a little bit together. And but like I've always viewed it as, well, not always. I'm more and more I'm viewing it as, as a manager and a staff, we have to earn that. We have to earn that trust, and we have to earn the ability to make administrative decisions without the legislative body being in our face. And one of the big ways that we do that is by being pretty darn open and transparent. And so when we are making administrative decisions that you know, that are the type that might require some kind of explanation, you know, I generally will try to keep our council and mayor pretty up to date on what our line of thinking is there. We're in a small town, so I can pretty accurately predict which administrative decisions are going to get to the ears of our council and our mayor, you know, within about 38 seconds after the decision is made. So I generally let them know beforehand what our line of thinking is on that sort of thing. And what I found is when we do that, they pretty much let us do our jobs, you know, and I haven't had too much trouble with anybody trying to overstep any bounds and get into our business. That's been our approach. Maybe that's not terribly different from what everybody else is doing, but it might be a slightly different way of thinking about it anyway.
Yeah, can I follow up on that? So I totally agree with what Brett's saying. And one approach, I think, is just to define the what and the how. So the issues are the exact same. Everybody has a stake and everybody's working through the same processes, but I try and let my council let me do the how, and they set the what. Like, what is it that you want to accomplish? Where do we want to be as a city? The mayor, what would you like to see have happen in terms of outcomes? And so we could be at the same table working on the same issues, but then when it becomes to how do we get there, I have a lot more influence or a lot more say. And then that works in reverse too, where I'll take a issue to a certain level where it's like, nope, this is a city council decision. Let's get you on the agenda, or let's take this issue to the council. And then we get it on the agenda, which is setting the what, but then we let the council do the how just let them function as a council, let the mayor run his meeting. And so there is a lot of overlap. It's not a total separation, but there is a distinction maybe in focus, working towards the same goal.
I was just going to add, kind of along the lines that Brett, pointed out. We try to be an open book, or I've tried to be an open book with my elected officials. I'll discuss just about anything with them outside of serious personnel issues, and I think that's helped my council have a lot of trust in me, so that they don't go looking for things because they don't think that we're hiding anything. And I found that that's helped keep the relationships and responsibilities a lot cleaner. I've seen it, with previous supervisors or people I've worked with. They have drawn that hard line, and it just causes mistrust from the elected officials. Always wondering, what are they hiding? Why won't they share that? But I found it very liberating to be like, hey, yeah, we'll discuss just about anything you want to know. And after a while, you build up that relationship of trust to a point where, yeah, they don't need to know every single nitty-gritty detail. They just trust that I'll bring them things that need to come to their attention. So again, probably just about the same as everybody else is doing.
I appreciate that. Let's switch gears a little bit. Again, I don't know the names of everybody on the call, so I'm not sure their positions or anything, but in case there are any on here who don't really have a city manager or don't understand what the city manager does, maybe they're newly elected. What is your day like as the city administrator, city manager in your respective city? Of course, that's going to differ depending on the size and everything else, but tell us a little bit about that.
Mine's easy. I'll just start. When I have my second day that was like the previous day, then I'll answer that question.
Fair enough.
Aaron, I'll insert a 2-word phrase I like to use. It's prioritized chaos. It's the continual struggle between the strategic plan and the program you're trying to pursue and the day-to-day alligators that are trying to bite you, you know where.
So can I ask a question, Aaron?
Go
I'll
ahead,
ask
John.
Wayne. I'll ask Wayne. You know, we've all seen that little chart that I think the 7 Habits made famous about you're worrying about the things that are important. And I mean, there's things that are important and the things that are unimportant and the things that are urgent and things that are not urgent. How do you, and it's important for you as a city manager to spend some time in those things that are important and not urgent. How do you do that?
So it's a great question, and I don't think the answer is the same any 2 days in a row. Like I think it was Ty that said, John, and I know you know that. You probably could think of 5 examples right off the top of your head. But one of the tools or things that I use to try to maintain that is, you know, do some sort of Stephen Covey or other list or whatever the formula or program it is that you use. Just keep those important things in mind, because inevitably you are going to be pulled away by literally maybe dozens of things in a day. But if you can keep those focused targets in mind, that I've got to do this, or we need to work on that, or break it down, or however it is you handle it, that's one of the ways I do that.
How do you get your council to do that?
The strategic plan, again, it's a good way to keep them focused on either, okay, that's the plan, and are we going to follow the plan, or should we moderate from the plan? I found that has been over the years a great tool and a great way to focus that conversation, even with the council, right? Because if anybody wants you to pull away from that, any individual council member wants to pull you away from that, they've got to have a majority of the council. They've got to have at least a good sized group of the council that agrees with them. And then that's legitimate. They want to do that and change policy and move that, then that's how it ought to be done.
One answer I would tender for your question there, John, is you know, empowering the staff. Your staff is, I think, critical. I'll share just a brief story. When I first started working here, we had to. One of my staffers came in one day and said, "Hey, we need to renew our, I think it's a DUNS number or something to do with grants," and I was like, "Cool, go ahead." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And so she goes and she starts working on it, and she comes back in my office about 2 minutes later and says, "What do you want the password to be?" And I was working on something, and I looked up at her and I said, "You have got to be crapping with me." My language might have been more Southern Utah-ish, but and she just looked at me and said, "Right." And she turned around and left, and I have never gotten a question like that from her since. And you know, I don't know if that's really an example of empowering your staff, but it certainly was. You know, over time, I've kind of had to instill in my staff, look, you guys can make decisions. You know, like I'm not an expert in I'm not really an expert in any particular field, you know, and you guys know these fields. You guys go ahead and make decisions, and that keeps a lot of the little, you know, for a while it was like I couldn't walk down the hallway here without making 28 decisions, and it was driving me batty, and you know, I actually thought, I was like, man, I'm not going to be long for this job if this is how it's going to be. And so I really had to empower and train my staff to just make their own decisions on stuff. And that's cleared quite a bit of just the little gremlins that jump out at you literally as you're walking down the hallway, you know. it's cleared a lot of that off my plate and allowed me more time to focus on what my actual job is, which is some of the broader stuff.
Sorry, having a hard time unmuting. I appreciate that. And I think you're absolutely right. You said something interesting, Brett, that you're not, well, just that you're not the expert in any one field, right? And that's why you have department heads who are, in theory, the experts in their fields and things like that. And I think that's important to remember that and allow them to do their jobs for sure. So you can focus on big picture. Let's see. So I'll remind anybody, if you do have a question, you're welcome to unmute yourself or type us a chat. Get into the end of our time here. Ty, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I was very curious in your perspective as the first manager in Morgan. What have you seen change while you've been there? What's your experience been like, both you personally, and then how's the organization changed since you've been there?
Let me just talk about kind of the initial, like what I came into it, what was lessons learned, I guess. I'll just say some of the initial things that I wasn't really prepared for. One was I have an impossible job description, and we all do, right? If you read through your contract or whatever it is, if you look at it in a task-oriented manner, and prior to having a city manager, everybody is evaluated on their tasks, right? Like, this is your job description. And so that became really overwhelming right in the beginning, because I can't do all of those tasks, but I am responsible for all of those functions. But we don't have, I mean, we have 14 employees total, and that includes a power department, right? So it's a lot of things to get done regardless of the size of city. But I had to help kind of transition to, I'm not an hourly employee. I'm a salaried professional, and you hired me to move the needle on these big, large items. And so that was one of the first things that I encountered. And then the next thing was expectations. So expectations were unreasonable. I mean, our mayor spent the first 1.5 to 2 years, every meeting we went to, saying, we got a manager, Ty will handle that. Send Ty, doesn't matter if it's a grant or whatever it is, school district meeting, county meeting, every person we talked to, every resident, it was call Ty, because now we have a manager. And so that was a little much. I didn't necessarily shut them down or discourage that, but on the opposite side, I had the same thing from employees, a lot like what Brett was saying. Oh, good, I have a manager here, handle every one of the issues that I have all day long and make all of our decisions for us. And then put on these different hats and do the exact same thing. So I'm actually the code enforcement officer by default, because I'm responsible for it, and we don't have one. I'm the economic development director. I'm the community development director, because we have part-time planning, right? So then you just compound all of these things, and I spent a lot of time maybe managing expectations, just because it's unrealistic. So I would just say, if you're thinking, hey, let's get a manager because they're going to independently by themselves fix everything that we can't get to, it's not a reasonable expectation. And you just have to have a kind of a long-term and just get the right fit, get the right person, and you'll work on all of those things together. One good example was I have a CPA firm that I turned into our finance director, right? And the mayor's like, I thought that's why we hired you. No, you didn't hire me as the financial expert, nor do you want me self-reporting on the budget that I just created. I would rather have an independent third party do our monthly financial reports and send them straight to council, right? It all can't be me. And so that's just kind of the initial. And since I've been here, things have gotten way better. The employees are empowered, like what Brett was saying. I'm at home with COVID right now, and I have an HR manager that's going through some very difficult HR decisions, and I can't be there in person. And I'm just so proud of how far we came, because before it was asked high. It's like, no, there's HR. We have HR policies. Just follow the policies and do your job. So there's been a lot of progress. I think the biggest things that have changed is our decision-making process. We've made some major decisions for a little community. Our mayor and council are really doing their role, starting to look strategically and getting a long-term vision of what we want to become instead of being in crisis mode. The county council used to assign themselves as department heads. So very difficult structure to get all of the departments functioning on the same page. Or, you know, hey, well, if I give my department a new truck, then the other department's going to want a new truck. Everything became very difficult to do anything. So a lot of decisions just didn't get made. One of the common terms I've heard is we take an issue and they say, yeah, we've been talking about that for the last 20 years. And I get to respond, so do we want to keep talking about it? Because I don't. Like, I'd rather not talk about it, or I'd rather get it done, but there's no point unless it's something that we're working towards. And from those type of conversations, we've been able to figure out priorities and get the budget in order to support it, and the strategies. And, you know, for a community of 4,500 people, I'll just mention a couple of the big ticket items that we've accomplished. We got a new sewer facility. We built a new substation for our power department. We incentivized our very first hotel, so it's under construction. We're building a bridge. We got a $2 million grant to build a bridge over the Weaver River. So we have our third crossing now, or it's underway. It's not built yet, but and then we have a citywide fiber network. And I know there's a lot of places where this becomes a very political issue, and we've come together as a community to say that was a need for us. It's not, do we want better or faster? It's just what we had was not an option. Most people couldn't get more than 5 megabytes. And that was it. And nobody's doing anything else. And so I just am really proud of how far things have come, and that these big decisions aren't overwhelming, and they're reachable and tangible now. And we have a great relationship between I think morale's way up. They feel supported. I feel supported from the council. I feel like 100% support from our council. So it's just made a night and day difference, I would say, for as scared as they were to make the decision. And maybe that's a good topic for later, is to maybe have our mayor talk about all of the decision points that they went through to decide to get a city manager. And it wasn't an easy decision. It's scary for everyone, but I think I'm really happy to be here, and I think they're really happy to have the position in place.
Ty, your mayor is on the call then? Did I understand you correctly?
No,
Okay.
I don't know. I haven't looked at any of the, I'm just saying, like, in maybe a follow-up session, like at a different conference, if there are communities, and I will just say, reach out. So if there is anybody that wants to know what we went through and the pain points and how they decided, I mean, it was really a crisis that got them to that decision to get a manager. It was the sewer system that had failed, and we had a moratorium on growth. That, you know, I would say be more proactive and get one sooner than later, no matter what size you are, because there's different ways to work that. Anyway, I'm just saying, maybe in the future that would be something better, is to ask our council members or our mayor the process that they went through to decide that. So
Did they have to go through a change in government, Ty, or was it just a matter of hiring you
Yep.
or creating the
Yep.
position?
Yep, they created a position. They did it by ordinance, created the ordinance and then defined my role. So we have a weak mayor form of government, or the 6-member council. So there's some options there. If you have a strong mayor form of government, it's a little easier to maybe do a city administrator versus a manager. But
Well, it sounds like you've definitely been busy. Haven't you only been in Morgan for a few years?
just completed 3 years.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of projects in 3 years. So, okay, panelists, we're just about out of time. Unless, if somebody from the audience wants to pipe in, we can ask a last question, but I think we'll leave on one. What is one thing you wish all elected officials knew about your job as a city administrator or manager?
Aaron, I think I'll just say one thing would be, someone alluded to it in a previous response today, but I would say that I don't have a personal agenda. City managers work at the will of the elected body. I tell my mayor all the time, you want this city to go back to be agricultural land and farming. Those are my marching orders. I have no idea how we would ever do that, but that's what I'll work on every day, right? Because sometimes when things don't go well politically for some elected officials, if they're unhappy with maybe not getting support from some of their other elected officials, sometimes that stress can settle on the manager, and the attention can now be, well, it must be the city manager's agenda that's driving this. And I would just say, a good manager we understand our role, and we will work to take the community in whatever direction the elected body wants to take it. Zero agenda. And I think that's something I would like elected officials to always remember. So thanks.
That's a good point. And it goes back to, I can't remember who, Ty, I think, mentioned the code of ethics that we adhere to. And I agree with you there, Matt. All right, anybody else? What do you wish elected officials knew about you or your job? I welcome responses or questions. I guess I see, as I'm looking over who's with us, I know sometimes you can't unmute yourself, but I see other managers on the call, Kane and Mark and Tim. Anything you think you'd like to add to this conversation? Gary, I'm sure I'm missing others. Melinda, who's been a manager in the past.
I guess all I can say, Aaron, this is Kane, but I guess what I can say is that I learned so much from this group, from the city managers. Does me a lot of good every once or twice a year that we get together and are able to talk and to get a lot of ideas and you start feeling like the Lone Ranger at times with your own city. And it's nice to hear that others have some of the same difficulties and problems. But this is a great group. We have a strong city managers group in the state of Utah. And there's some great city managers in the state. And I think that goes back to what kind of Wayne was talking about with the longevity issue of our city managers. We as a group, I think we do very well. And I think we know what our role is. One of the things that I would add to my job, what people ask me what I do, and I say I do crisis management. That's what my job is. I solve the problems that I rely on my staff to solve all the problems that they can. Anything they can't usually comes to me. And so that's one of the things. But the other thing is, I think we as city managers for our cities are the glue that binds everything together. We're the go-between between our staff and the council, legislative body, and vice versa. and we're the thing that makes it work, and we have to figure it out. And we got to figure out a lot of personalities to make it work, but that's what our job is.
Thank you, Kane. Any last words from any of our other managers?
Well, unless anybody wants to speak up, I think we can close this down. You know, I think, I mean, to show how dedicated some of these folks are, we've got Wayne Pyle here. You might have looked a minute ago. We kind of looked around because an alarm was going off. Wayne is not in his office. He was going from here to there, who knows where, and he knew he had this commitment, so he dropped in the North Ogden City offices and said, I need a Wi-Fi connection and a place to sit down. It looks like he's in a storage room or something. I can see the papers or something behind him. And I've got Ty from Morgan, who's home with coronavirus and is still joining us. And I just think that speaks volumes for the dedication of these city managers that wanted to help out today. So I just wanted to thank all of you personally, and I know most of you personally, and I so appreciate you and all you've taught me over the years. And on behalf of the League of Cities and Towns, I want to thank you for your time today.